In 2022, I read 140 books, and I made a video about that experience as well if you'd like to check that out. But in this video, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite books out of those 140, some of the books that I found most helpful and applicable to life, and so hopefully they will help you as well. If you are here just for the list of books, that is fine. That will be linked in the description for you to check out. If you are looking for fiction recommendations, unfortunately, this is not the video for you. But if you like nonfiction, hopefully there'll be some books in here that will help you out, that you might enjoy reading as I did. So we'll get right into it with my second favorite read of the year, which would be, if I can get this to focus, it's not going as planned, 4,000 Weeks, there we go, by Oliver Burkeman. All right, so I love productivity, I love time management, I love making the most of things, and that's great, but there is a lot out there on hustle culture and that sort of thing. That's not the kind of productivity that I like, and in 4,000 Weeks, Oliver Burkeman presents a very refreshing perspective on time management, on productivity. Essentially, it is, learning to live intentionally, learning to make the most of your time, but in a way that is just aligned with your values, slowing down from the rat race, the busyness of life, and just living a good intentional life. And so I think that's a topic that is very relevant in today's society, and that topic will come up again later on with another book recommendation. But yeah, just a refreshing perspective on time, on life, just living intentionally, living better, living slowly. So I really, really enjoyed that one. The second book that I will recommend that I really enjoyed is Do Hard Things by Steve Magness. There we go. So this was a book that I felt like the title didn't really do the book justice. It's about toughness, performance, that sort of thing, this do hard things. And so by just the title and subtitle, by looking at the book, it conjures up images of people like David Goggins or Jocko Willink, this tough, just, go all out, no BS, and that's not what the book is about at all. Nothing against David Goggins or Jocko Willink. They're amazing. I've read their books. That works for some people, but this book takes into account the purpose behind why you do hard things, how to actually perform well, being wise about things. And in the book, he actually references another book called Why We Do What We Do by Edward Deci, which is actually one of my favorite books. And that's why I liked this book so much, was because it was a lot more in line with that one. And in the reasons for why we do things, our motivations are internal motivations. You have to be doing things for the right reasons in order for them to succeed, and being tough, performing well, but from a place of wisdom, of intention, going against this go all out hustle culture, unless you're doing 100%, it's worthless. It was just a very good holistic perspective on how to accomplish difficult things, which to me is very different sounding than do hard things, tough it out. So, the book was not what I expected, but it was way better than what I expected. I really liked the lens, the perspective of it, on just having the right reasons behind it all, and being wise about it, and how that actually leads to being able to do harder things and being able to perform better. So I really enjoyed that one. The next group of books that I'm going to talk about are related to health and wellness. starting with nutrition. So, the book Deep Nutrition, which is by Catherine and Luke Shanahan. So this is quite a lengthy book for nutrition. It's more dense than any of the other nutrition related books that I read last year, but I found it very enjoyable. It was weird how much I enjoyed it because it seemed almost like a textbook, but I really appreciated the context that it gave you for nutrition as a whole. It's not just like do this, do that. It was, here's the history of our ancestors of eating, of how their diets compare to our diets, of genetics, of how things have changed. And so for me, in order to internalize things, to learn, to be motivated to change, I need the context. So this was a great book for me in giving me that context, just with nutrition in general and how our diets are awful compared to our ancestors and all of the dangers of that. So the very key takeaways, if you're looking to learn about nutrition, highlighted in this book, the 2 red flags of do not do is stop eating vegetable oil and stop eating excess sugars. Those are the 2 main takeaways for the don'ts. And then the book was broken down into 4 pillars of what you should eat, and that is meat, bone in, eating the whole animal, which brings us to liver, very, very healthy and good for you. Then fermented foods or sprouted foods, and just fresh foods, whole foods. So those were the 4 pillars of what your diet should include. But yeah, as I said, the book was very helpful for me because it gave the entire context. So if you want to go deep into context, I highly recommend Deep Nutrition. Still on the topic of nutrition, but switching gears, is the book The End of Craving, and that is by Mark Schatzker. So this was the book out of all of the nutrition books that I read that I most appreciated in terms of presenting a healthy relationship with food. I think that is such a key part of, why we eat the foods that we do. We have a certain relationship with food, and the title is The End of Craving. It really presents why we crave things and how our diets, especially our modern diets, are set up to make you crave things even more. And so giving you the perspective of here's why you crave things is very helpful to have you be able to understand why this is happening, what is your fault, and for a lot of things, what is not your fault, how your body actually works, how cravings work. Then you can approach your relationship with food in a much healthier way, and just get rid of, I lost my train of thought. Healthier way, just incorporating grace, forgiveness and grace kind of into how you approach food, that it's, some of it is not your fault in a sense. Obviously you need to take ownership of the choices that you make, but just a much healthier perspective on why you crave foods, which when you understand that, then you can move forward better into how to deal with that. So that's The End of Craving. Sticking in the health category, but moving on from nutrition, we have the book Move by Caroline Williams. So this is a book about movement, as you could probably guess. But what I liked about this book was that each chapter was its own subtopic within the overall topic of movement, which I really liked. And so it gave a nice holistic picture of movement and exercise. It wasn't just this, you should exercise because it's good for you. Like, everybody knows that. Everybody knows they need a little bit more movement in their life. But this was a great one, just breaking down the subtopics, giving you a holistic view of movement. So chapters would be about walking, dance, strength, even chapters on breathing, one chapter on breathing, one chapter on rest. Rest is a huge part of exercise, of living well. So I really enjoyed, again, the big picture approach to movement, as opposed to just like, you should exercise more. So that was, one of the best books I've read in terms of giving you the whole, again, the context of things, the whole picture. And then at the end of the book, it actually had a summary of the actionable advice, the key takeaways from each chapter, which is really nice. More books should do that. Here's this book, but then, in summary, here are the key takeaways for you to actually implement into your life. So yeah, really enjoyed that one. Next up, we have The Longevity Plan, and that is by John and Jane Ann Day. And so this is a book about the longevity village in China, and this is a book out of all of the books that I've read so far in relation to how to live, that I would say gives the best holistic approach to how to live a fulfilling, healthy, long life. So these people in this village in China just seem to get it. They just do life well. They live consistently to over 100, and their quality of life does not suffer hardly at all as they age. They're still working in the fields at 95 years old and enjoying it. So this was, just a book that gave the best overall picture of how to live a better life, not just eat right, exercise. It tied in everything they do, their purpose, their meaning behind things, their relationships, their relationship to food and eating and exercise, like the relationships to all of it. So yeah, just a nice holistic approach to everything. If you were to pick one book out of all of the books that I have read, as a guide to how to live your life, this one checked all the boxes for me from a holistic perspective. Not, the most super engaging book the entire time, but from a practical standpoint, takeaways to actually implement into your life, a very good holistic picture of how to properly live. Next up, we have biographies, and I didn't read too many of them, but by far my favorite book of the entire year was Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. And Walter Isaacson is a very well-known author, biographer, and I've read a number of his other books, and one of those other books was Benjamin Franklin, which when I read that at the time, he became my new favorite person. And in reading Leonardo da Vinci, he dethroned Benjamin Franklin. So now Leonardo da Vinci is my new favorite person. Thankfully, I have pop vinyls already of those guys. I don't think you can see them in the frame, but yes, Leonardo da Vinci, definitely my new favorite person. So as somebody who is curious, who wants to learn everything, do everything, understand everything, to do it all for its own sake, to dabble in things, to start things that I don't necessarily finish, to want to do it all, but to want to master it all and jump around between all of my interests. Reading this book gave me permission to do all that. I just felt like Da Vinci was kind of a kindred spirit. Obviously, I'm not a master at anything, but you know the name Da Vinci, you've heard of the Mona Lisa, you know he's a genius, a master at all of these different things, and he was brilliant. But I loved just getting to know him as just a curious person, as someone who just followed his interests and did things for their own sake, which is a big thing a big theme in my life, a big theme for a lot of these books is doing things for the right reasons. So yeah, I just absolutely fell in love with Da Vinci, how he operated, just curious, having fun, just wanting to constantly explore and understand and become better and more skilled. So yeah, new favorite person by far. A more modern biography that I enjoyed was the book Will by Will Smith. So this was one that I listened to the audiobook version of, which if you're going to read or listen to this book, I would highly recommend the audiobook version because it is narrated by Will Smith, who is an entertainer, and so he makes the book very entertaining. His ego definitely shines through. If you don't like that, if you aren't a fan of Will Smith, then his ego could definitely be a turnoff. But overall, again, as an audiobook version, it was entertaining. But what I liked most about it was seeing, the progression of his journey, seeing how he got to where he did. So much of his success was actually very calculated, very planned out. He had a lot of people helping him along the way where they were thinking through and planning how to become successful and then executing on that plan. So very, very interesting from that standpoint of just how calculated his success was. Not that he didn't put in the work and not that he didn't have talent along the way, but just the idea that success is something that you can actually kind of plan out and work towards in that sense. So that's what I enjoyed most about that book. Then we have the book Remember by Lisa Genova, and this is in the category of books that I did not expect to like as much as I did. So I love learning. I'm a big fan of my memory. And so I'm always interested in how the mind works, how to improve my mind, how to sustain my mind, to keep it healthy, especially long term. And so this was a very enjoyable read on memory, on the brain, on how it all works. But it was a good mix of science with just, really accessible, easy entrance for anyone to get into. And just, a nice overview of the brain and memory, but in a very accessible way. And then the next one in the category of unsuspecting, the category of books that I did not expect to like nearly as much as I did, was The Beauty of Dusk by Frank Bruni. So this is his story of starting to go blind. And that is what the book is about, but really that's not what the book is about. The book, to me, was just a beautiful picture of life, of the ups and downs, of the struggles. And it was one of those books that I really couldn't put my finger on why it was so good, why it stayed with me long after I read it. Just this feeling of like, what was it about that book? It was just, it lingered. That's like the movie Ratatouille for me. It's just one of those movies that's like, it's a great movie, but I can't really tell you why. It's just got something about it that is just great. So I think that's the mark of a good book is when you don't know why it's so good. So yeah, just a very, very beautiful picture, very beautiful portrait of life in general, which I enjoyed. Next up, we have the spiritual category, starting with WayMaker by Ann Voskamp. So prior to last year, I had never read Ann Voskamp before. I ended up reading 3 of her books, and WayMaker was my favorite. And I haven't read too many books similar to hers, but I marveled at how she could present her life, some of the challenges that she faced, the ups and downs, but it just seemed like the entire thing was just pure poetry. She just has a way with words that was unlike anything I'd ever read before, a very, very unique, distinct voice. just like the seemingly mundane story of her life, of her struggles, but not mundane at all because it was just beautiful poetry. I don't know. It was a weird mix. But yeah, she's talented in that sense. So I very much enjoyed getting into her books. And next up we have The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, another author that was new to me last year, and another book on the topic of slowing down, living intentionally, which is something that I'm a big fan of, something that I want to cultivate in my own life. And so this was a great book to emphasize that, emphasize the ruthless elimination of hurry, slowing down, but, from a spiritual standpoint, incorporating God into that, how, what the Bible teaches about that sort of thing, talking about solitude, talking about Sabbaths, but just another great reminder of, the need to slow down, to live intentionally, to get out of this rat race that we live in. So next up, we have a book called You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. And this book is chalked up under the category of just a topic that is important and underrated, I think. So this was the first book I had read on the topic of listening. And listening is so important in life, and it is a skill that not only isn't talked about, but it's a skill that I think most people don't even view as a skill. So this definitely wasn't the best book that I read the entire year, but I think just the topic of listening is so important that I would recommend this book. Just learning what a good listener actually is. There were a lot of practical things about, the physical act of listening, some science mixed in, as well as, just how to be a better listener and the value, the importance of listening. So yeah, listening, definitely a skill that doesn't get talked about enough, so I wanted to talk about it here. So if you know any good books on listening, on how to have meaningful conversations and that sort of thing, I'd love to hear your recommendations on that. But yeah, that was my first foray into that topic, and definitely an important one. And to cap things off, we have one just for fun, a short one, and that is I'd Rather Be Reading by Ann Bogel. So yeah, a short book, but just a book in celebration of the joy of reading. So if you like reading, if you like books, this is a nice short read that just gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling of, why you love books. Talks about a lot of the nuances that non-readers wouldn't really understand. They don't get it. What's the big deal? Reading is great. So that's a fun one to finish off. So those were some of the books that I read last year. Weirdly, I think previous years when I read way fewer books, there were better books just in the ones that I'd read. More, 5 out of 5, highly recommend, you should read this type books. Even though I read 140 last year, there weren't that many that stood out as like, this is life-changing, you need to read that. So even with these 14 recommendations, there aren't many that I would say, everyone should read this book. But these were the ones that stood out to me for various reasons. Ideally, it gives you enough of a variety in different subject matter that at least one of them would be interesting to you, helpful to you. So, those are some of the books that stood out to me. I would love to hear what your favorite read of last year was, what your favorite read ever is, any book recommendations, especially nonfiction. That is what I love. I love to learn. I love self-improvement. So anything on that topic, how to live a better life, how to be more intentional, that sort of thing, I would love to hear your recommendations. So once again, if you'd like to hear my experience on reading 140 books last year, that video is linked, and in the description there's a link to this list of books as well as the whole list of books that I read last year. So thank you very much for joining me, and happy reading.